Well, it's been 3 years since Britain left the EU after years of acrimonious infighting over the 2016 referendum result.
The former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, won a barnstorming majority off the back of the result, with Labour scrambling to keep the party together.
Well, how times have changed. A recent poll by Unheard indicates that...
And they're just, like, why is it these riotoids who get put into these positions of, you know, being presenters on, like, national TV, why are they all fucking charisma vacuums? And they all get paid handsomely for it. They're not even good presenters. I know, obviously, I'm not exactly I'm not exactly like a beacon of charisma myself, but, you know, at least mine's all been done through my own hand. And people watch me anyway, regardless, right? These people are getting paid fucking massive sums of money by gigantic hedge funds and private equity firms to be able to be the propagandists for this, for their overall political ideology, literally on their, whilst still being in Westminster for some of them. And they don't even have the basic charisma that's necessary to be able to put across their viewpoints in any kind of engaging manner at all. They're soporific. This infuriates. The proof. No, there is no meritocracy. The meritocracy is false, and these guys are literally the God's honest proof that there is no meritocracy.
Almost all British constituencies believe we were wrong to exit the European Union. So was Brexit a mistake? We're now joined by former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, as well as former leader of the Brexit Party and GB News presenter, Nigel Farage. Both of you, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nigel, perhaps I could start...
So we literally have an ex-Conservative MP, another ex-Conservative MP, a current Conservative MP, and the ex-leader of the Brexit and Party and UKIP. Just the fucking... It's ridiculous. This is fucking ridiculous.
Start with you, because we had this Unheard poll showed that 54% of the country agreed that Britain was wrong to leave the EU and only 28% disagreed. So
he has literally got no cadence to his voice. He literally sounds like exactly what he is. Someone reading the words off of the sheet of paper in front of him or the auto cue.
It seems the majority now think leaving the EU was a mistake. What would you say to those people?
Well, it was a mistake to leave the European Union exit in the hands of something called the Conservative Party. They never believed in it from the start. They dragged their heels. We were put through 3 years of total misery. I mean, old Bercow here helped make it more difficult than it had to be. But the truth of it is, you know, I mean, to me... I
mean, he's right, but he's wrong about why that he's right. In that there is theoretically a world in which Jeremy Corbyn wins in 2017. We organise some kind of left-leaning platform for Brexit that involves a bunch of nationalisation and essentially changing the economic outlook of the UK from being a net importer to a net exporter, which means that we don't necessarily see as much of an impact from leaving the single market as we wouldn't have as big a trade deficit in those cases. That there could be a world in which the Labour Party are in charge of Brexit and it doesn't go quite as badly, or it goes reasonably well. Plus, we were allowed then free of a bunch of the competition rules of the European Union that allows us to do a little bit more around nationalisation than we would otherwise have been with more favourable deals for the state. So that's possible. It's possible that there could have been a world in which Brexit went well under Labour. Because Nigel Farage is right that the worst people to do this were definitely the Conservative Party, but for all the wrong reasons that he thinks that, because he thinks it should have been even more right-wing, workers should have been fucked over even more. That's what Farage believes. So it would have been even worse if he'd done it.
3 years ago this week, we moved house, right? And there were lots of new rooms and lots of excitement, but to make it work, we had to be truly dynamic and make real change. And the truth is, most of those packing boxes are still there. I mean, even little wins, like removing the 5% minimum VAT that Europe demanded on our domestic energy bills, even things like that haven't been done. So what the polling shows is disenchantment. You know, and if you ask me right now, am I disappointed with Brexit? I'm sorry to say, I'm going to have to say yes. So the government have made an absolute pig's ear of the whole thing in purely economic terms. Right. Now, the sovereignty argument's simple. We're self-governing. There are no excuses. We've won back the birthright to mismanage our own country, and we're doing a jolly.
But then again, the sovereignty argument was always nonsensical because we're using our current sovereignty to choose to be part of a bunch of European treaties. Obviously, we're not anymore because people decided against that, for better or for worse. But if Remain had won the referendum, that would be an argument which is also pro-sovereignty, because then we would be using our national sovereignty to then want to continue to engage with those European treaties, right? That's still an argument based upon sovereignty. So what he's saying here makes no sense. But and we can also use our sovereignty to be able to keep a bunch of the European Union rules that that he thinks are bad but other people think are good. That's also an argument you can do for sovereignty.
Really good job of that. We have our own foreign
I mean, it's easy to point the blame elsewhere, but do you think when the debate was going on, people should have been a little bit more honest and realistic about the time it would take to move on? Because certain things have happened. You're not paying into the EU budget, you've got freedom over your own laws, you've not got freedom of movement. The big things have happened, but those other things you're talking about, should you as well, when you were championing it, be a little bit more honest about the time scale?
Yes, we should have triggered Article 50 on the 24th of June 2016. It should have been done immediately. If we'd done that, there wouldn't have been time for the Remainer, the second referendum.
And again, he's making an argument based upon sovereignty. And then he's also saying, well, actually, but there should be no new sovereign... the Parliament shouldn't be sovereign to be able to decide what the withdrawal agreement is. There should just be a unilateral decision made by basically the cabinet, a top-down approach from the cabinet to decide on their own how Brexit should entail, rather than it being a whole parliamentary voice, which is at least far more democratic on a representative basis than entirely being done by a very, very small minority cabinet. Again, this myth, there's this gigantic fucking myth about Nigel Farage being some kind of populist, when he is an autocrat. He likes autocracy. He just would much rather the autocracy was in the hands of British autocrats than European autocrats, and done less democratically than otherwise would be. His point is completely nonsensical.
The mega whinge campaign, we should have got on with the job. We have done none of those things. And there are 5.5 million men and women in this country running small businesses. They expected to see relief from excessive regulation. It'll be 7 years in a couple of months' time since that vote, and as yet they've seen nothing. So look, it's been horribly mishandled.
Also, Nigel, I'm going to say it. Obviously, I was warned about the potato audio, but I'm going to comment on it yet again. Nigel, you are a commodities broker and a multimillionaire. You can afford a condenser microphone if you're going to spend your entire life going on news bulletins and news shows to debate your positions. You can get proper audio. I work for just above minimum wage, and I've got a condenser microphone. If I can do it, Nigel, you can.
I don't think there's any chance of it being reversed in terms of us joining, but I do feel that the next Labour government will probably keep us very tightly aligned to single market rules, and in the economic side of the argument, we just won't get the benefits, and it's very disappointing.
John, if I can bring you in here, I mean, Nigel's case is pretty much that it's not really Brexit that's at fault. It's the Conservative government that's implemented it, and perhaps people in Parliament, aided and abetted by you, who tried to frustrate it. But look, we were told that within weeks of voting to leave the EU, the economy would collapse. We'd need a punishment budget.
Old Project Fear.
Exactly. It didn't really happen, did it? What the people who campaigned for Remain said it might not have gone as well as Nigel thought, but it hasn't gone as badly as people said it would, has it?
I mean, it absolutely has gone as bad as people said it would, because, as I've said 1,000 times, over and over and over again, as a country with a gigantic trade deficit, we rely on imports. Putting a bunch of tariffs onto imports was always going to cause inflation. It's so stupid. We're leaving the single market.
It's gone very badly indeed. I'm not going to be held responsible for what George Osborne did or didn't say or imply at the time. That isn't within my bailiwick. What I would say to Nigel, who's a cheeky chappy, he's an amiable rogue, some would say an incorrigible scoundrel.
So are you as well, John.
He does remind me of university days when one used to debate with members of the Socialist Workers' Party. And when they lambasted capitalism, international capitalism, global capitalism, those of us who took a different view would say, well, look at socialism. Look at the evidence in practice in the Soviet Union, to which they responded. They were a constantly moving target, but saying, No, that's not real socialism. That's a distortion. That's debauch. That's
I mean, it wasn't. Like, did the workers own the means of production? No. Therefore, it's not socialism. Case closed.
state capitalism. With Nigel, instead of taking it on the chin and recognising that, in fact, to date, it has been a grotesque blunder and the biggest foreign policy mistake of the post-war period, what Nigel wants to do, because he can't abandon the religiosity of his lifelong support for Brexit, is to blame someone else. So it's mysterious forces. It's, if you like, a fifth or sixth estate. It's those Machiavellian types working night and day to frustrate.
I mean, John is absolutely correct here in that there is always this kind of the continuous goalpost shifting by the incredible ardent Brexiteers who, instead of arguing on their own terms for what they genuinely believe in, because there is always an argument to be made saying that whatever the economic consequences of leaving the European Union, the people who voted to leave the European Union, or the people who are still incredibly forthright in the defence of the decision to leave the European Union, economics was never the desire. It was cultural. It was almost kind of philosophical in nature, right? And so you cannot win these people over in economics. But even so, was always this constant goalpost shifting and this unfalsifiable claim that everything can be blamed on some kind of fifth columnist who's just not doing real Brexit correctly. Which is frustrating because you can always say, right, well, maybe the economic stuff hasn't gone well and that could have been rearranged. But it's very difficult for Nigel Farage to defend that when, even before leaving the European Union, both him and Daniel Hannan, two of the biggest names with regards to the Leave campaign in the run-up to the the referendum, both of them were saying that they didn't want to leave the single market, wanted a Norway-style deal, they wanted to maintain Parliament, they wanted to retain the sovereignty we previously had, whilst continuing access to the economic treaties that would give us future economic prosperity. They all agreed that, and then suddenly it changed on a dime as soon as the result of the vote happened. So he can't walk that back. He can't continue walking it back because it doesn't make any sense from his own words, nonetheless. And that's why there always has to be this. But it's not even like things with the comparison that the Bercow made doesn't make any sense either. In the When socialists denounce the Soviet Union, they are making a fundamental distinction that they do not believe in the economic model of the USSR, right? Whereas Nigel Farage isn't even claiming there's something specifically bad about the current Brexit plan. He's just saying, well, the people who are doing it are the wrong people, which is even more of a dumb argument than what you'd get from like tankoids about the Soviet Union.
The will of the British people or the designs of Farage. I mean, really, it is nonsense on stilts, Nigel. And to be honest, I say to you in all politeness and candour, you can do a bit better than that. Why not start by admitting, first, that people are poorer, wages are down. Foreign direct investment has slumped. Sterling has taken a permanent 10% hit. The economy has been hit to the tune of about 100 billion.
Okay, well, let's bring Nigel in for some of the... Because other people might say COVID had that impact. So let's bring Nigel in.
And I think what's so frustrating as well is that these things that John Bercow is saying are all true, and in the sense that they're all happening. Whether how much of this you can attribute specifically to Brexit remains to be seen. Now, I would say that there are, with regards to the economic hit, there's absolutely no denying that leaving the single market was bad for the UK economy. We all know that, but there's also this kind of there's this Remainer mind prison that they live in, where they will always attribute everything bad that exists in the current year, right? They will always attribute it to specifically Brexit because it happened in 2016. And the reason why they all do this is because they are rich enough and middle class enough that they were not the people who saw the issues that we had during the austerity period before the Brexit vote. The economy was always screwed, people were always fucked, working class were getting screwed over, wages were stagnant. All these things that Bercow correctly says is bad were all happening before we left the European Union. Has it made it worse? Undoubtedly, right? It's undoubted. It's you cannot deny that leaving the single market specifically has made all of these economic woes even worse. But were they good before leaving the European Union? No. In fact, the decline was, quite frankly, the global financial crisis followed by austerity. Those are the real issues here. And by having so much of our mental space continually sectioned off in this this fucking perpetual debate over the consequences of Brexit, and with a very small group of people, all these people probably fucking voted for David Cameron as well, claiming that, we can trace all of these issues back down to Brexit rather than really looking at what the economy was like beforehand. We don't properly scrutinise the neoliberal economic groupthink that led to the economic woes that we have today. It's a really convenient scapegoat for neoliberals to try and blame Brexit rather than the main issues that we had even before the Brexit vote happened.
Remember what Brexit's about. Remember, the big point of Brexit is to be a self-governing democratic nation. And that means you can get things right and you can get things wrong. All right? Very simple, as opposed to the vast majority of our law, and certainly in commercial law, 80% of it being made somewhere else over which we have little say. So we're in charge. We can't blame Brussels anymore. But the point is, it's never a mistake for a country to be independent, sovereign, and free. That is never, ever.
Again, he's making this similar claim, like you said before, that somehow deciding to be a member of the European Union to follow their whatever economic rules and precepts they have based upon those treaties is entirely dependent on the sovereign desire to A, join the European Union and remain there in the first place, and second of all, to want to join the economic treaties in the first place as well. So we're already sovereign to do that or not. We can always choose not to. And before 2016, we always chose to do so, and then after 2016, we chose not to. Whether or not we decided to leave or not doesn't change how the British people can self-determine democratically whether or not they want to adhere to that or not.
A mistake. My complaint is that the party that was given the job of carrying it out didn't actually believe in it. We started off with a negotiation that was always going to give us a rubbish deal. And there's so much more we can do. And John, until last year, we were actually the fastest growing economy in the G7. Wages in the first 3 or 4 years.
I mean, this is the same shit that we were getting from Jacob Rees-Mogg on, though, when I watched that segment on the last stream, where they're saying, well, actually, we were growing super fast in 2021. Yeah, because our economy shrunk more than everybody else's in 2020. We're really getting back to where we were before. And actually, when you look at the net growth over those 2 years, it was lower than the rest of the G7 regardless.
After Brexit did go up quite appreciably. Now, on economics, we can argue till the cows come home about whether it's hurt us, whether it's benefited us. My argument is this, that Brexit needed supply-side reform to maximise the potential benefits. That's about us becoming more competitive than our European neighbours, and we haven't done it. So my complaint. No conspiracy.
John, Nigel, I think that he's just about concluding.
We needed supply side, market-based supply side reforms to increase competition. Yeah, that went fucking well, didn't it, Nigel? What happened when we put the supply side, libertarian prime minister in charge? The fucking economy tanked. So I don't think you can really justify it on those grounds anymore either.
Nigel, I've listened carefully and with respect to that thesis, but what I say to you is this. It's one thing to excoriate Theresa May, or indeed before her David Cameron, by saying, well, neither of them was a believer in Brexit.
It's true. It is boomer Zoom meeting vibes. And what was the parish council meeting? Jackie Weaver, was it?
And that would be true. I think she did her honest, plodding, inadequate, grossly unimaginative best, to be fair to her, but I accept that she presided over the matter in political terms with absolutely crass ineptitude. Where your argument seems to me to be on very difficult ground is that you can't very well lacerate Boris Alexander de Pfeffel on the same front. Boris Johnson came out explicitly in support of Brexit. He wanted Brexit. He favoured Brexit. He championed Brexit. He wanted, in fact, a Brexit not dissimilar to that which you support. And so if you argue the case, Nigel, as I know you would want candidly...
No, that's not true. Boris Johnson was far more left-wing than what Nigel Farage was looking for. Nigel Farage does not like Boris Johnson's governing style or his economic policy. I don't think that's correct at all. They may have agreed specifically on Brexit. I mean, Nigel Farage was ideologically tied to Brexit. Boris Johnson was not. He was using it cynically, to be fair, as a tool of self-promotion. So I don't think that's a really cogent point there by John Bercow, to be honest.
To do fairly and honestly, look at Brexit under Bojo, not under May or Cameron or these secret Remainers or Ramoners, and it has been a terrible failure.
John,
Nigel, let me say to you.
John, let me just come in. John, let me just ask you a question here.
Allow Philip to be the speaker.
How can you be so sure that Brexit has failed? I mean, literally, we left the EU 3 years ago. Within 6 weeks, we'd got a COVID pandemic where the government, ridiculously in my opinion, but they locked down the country for 2 years, the economy. They literally paid people to do nothing. Clearly, there was going to be a massive economic consequence from locking down the economy. We're facing the consequences now of that, the spike in demand and the huge inflation that followed, the war in Ukraine with energy prices. We haven't really seen the evidence of Brexit, have we? Because everything has been coloured by what happened over COVID. So you're saying that because of everything collapsed during the lockdown, it's all Brexit's fault. It's not, is it?
I think that, if you'll forgive me saying so,
Look, you're absolutely right, Edward, yeah. Farage and GBB's readying the ideological framework for the future far-right split from the Tories and kind of postmodern stab-in-the-back myth. 100%. I'm going to make this point abundantly clear again. GB News as an outlet was specifically made by an alliance between the Legatum Institute, which is a right-wing market fundamentalist think tank owned by the Legatum Fund, which is a private equity fund that funds a bunch of kind of capitalist projects all around the world. They're a pro-Brexit, pro-free market think tank, right? This is also in alliance with the Marshall Wace hedge fund, who have $400 million of investments in private healthcare provision. These are incredibly right-wing, like laissez-faire, free marketeer type people who are deliberately creating this network to use as a platform to be able to agitate for these ideas specifically. This is why GB News continually creates lots of content that is used to undermine the existence of a public NHS, free point of service, right? They've been trying to manufacture consent for that for years. That's why they bring on people they literally have a show fronted by Emily Carver, who is the communications director of the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is the most right-wing think tank in the country, apart from maybe Policy Exchange. So it's think tanks upon think tanks funded by private equity, funded by hedge funds, who all have the same ideological precepts. And they're trying to use their platform to move the whole political conversation in this country rightwards. And part of that is going to be by trying to undermine an ideologically kind of heterodox conservative party that has people on the free market end, people on the neoliberal end, people literal probably literal actual fascists in that party as well. And they're trying to undermine the economic realist standpoint of people like Rishi Sunak in the Conservative Party, whether they do it by trying to get Liz Truss to the head of the party to create it into a free market party, or whether they try and destroy it completely by promoting Reform UK to try and vote split their way out of into complete irrelevancy at the next election. That's their specific desire as a platform. That's what GB News exists to do. And so that's why they continue to promote all of these future measures and try and undermine the existence of the Conservative Party as it is today.
Even frankly, Philip, if you won't, I would say that is an act of self-delusion on your part. As you know, I've always given you the highest brownie points for your extreme candour, both in the chamber and outside. Look, of course.
Well, I'm going to join in with Philip here. I'm going to join in with, because I absolutely, locking the world down for 2 years has a significant impact, and you can't throw that away. Over to you, John.
I mean, it really hasn't. Like, the productive capacity of the economy hasn't really changed in that time.
Esther, I don't disagree with either of you, or indeed with Nigel, if he were to say that COVID has had a deleterious impact. That, I think, is an incontestable fact about which we can quickly agree and move on. The issue is this: given that very large numbers of other countries right across the world were negatively affected by COVID as well, how have they bounced back? It is a chronic state of affairs.
I haven't heard of that, Sky, sorry.
And a searing, coruscating indictment of Brexit that nearly 2 years after the worst of it, we are predicted in 2024, Nigel, by the OECD to be the worst performing economy of all. Now, I think if you're going to operate in the spirit of fairness, you have to say you can't blame that on COVID. So no doubt Nigel will retreat into his right-wing lager and say, no, it's the fault of the Ramonas. They are becoming these
John,
hang on, John.
Let Nigel get a word in.
Hey, Sky, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Justice Stream.
Brexit did not force this government into giving us the highest tax burden in 70 years, productivity that is...
I mean, yes, if the economy is at the position where it might slow down because economic growth is being impacted by leaving the single market, for example, by curbing demand because wages have stagnated because of lack, because it's all essentially one big maelstrom of economic woes that comes out of leaving the single market and the prosperity that comes from that, then it is to blame, and that is going to be an issue that's going to lead to the increase in taxation, because you're going to need the economic growth to be able to grow the existing amount of tax money to feed the current demand that we have for public services. So the tax burden increasing is actually going to be a function of the fact that our economic growth has slowed, both because neoliberalism is bad on the face of it, and because leaving the single market has had those economic impacts as well. Like, you can't get away from that.
20% below that of France. But I can't believe I've never seen a Frenchman work, and yet our productivity is lower than theirs. We have made a hash of this. But I will say this to you. Because of Brexit, we've signed the AUKUS deal.
And you've got to remember as well that Farage made his money in the financial sector. He's a commodities broker. Like, he never contributed anything. There was no... Like, Nigel Farage has never, ever in his life been economically productive whatsoever. And he favours an economic model that is about deregulation of the financial sector to be able to attract more and more essentially financial liquidity into the country, but specifically in the financial services sector, which again is not productive. The whole reason why we have a stagnant economy is because the last 44 years have essentially been entirely based upon the fumes of economic growth from an unregulated financial services sector in the run-up to the global financial crisis. Before that period, was the only time we had like lots of growth in this country under the Blair administration. And the demise of manufacturing is because we thought that could go on forever when it didn't. And he's a big fan of that. Like, the reason why we've lost productivity is entirely because of the economic precepts that Nigel Farage supports in the first place. So for him to come to us and tell us this big problem, this existential problem with the UK economy is a lack of productivity, I'm like, yeah, that's what you wanted. You got exactly what you wanted. That is literally what you wanted.
With Australia, a very significant, important foreign policy development. Because of Brexit, we've taken the lead in Ukraine. Now, you can agree or disagree with that position.
I mean, it's high gas prices rather than high oil prices. I would probably point that to, Sky, although you're absolutely right. We should be trading more with Venezuelan oil. We obviously, because the West deliberately tried to screw with Venezuela by all those economic sanctions. OPEC played their part in that as well. OPEC deliberately increasing production when they didn't need to, and massively tanking the price of wholesale oil prices in the global north, destroyed Venezuela's economy, basically. So OPEC are really to blame for that.
But it wouldn't have happened as members of a European Union. Because of Brexit, we were able to get a quick, fast, effective vaccine rollout, whilst the rest of Europe was waiting for some woman from Cyprus who hadn't even been elected to make decisions.
We had a very successful rollout of the vaccine because of exemplary conduct by suppliers and British public servants.
Yeah, like they again, just yeah, OPEC does need to increase production now, but they don't need to do it. They need to do it on a utilitarian basis. They need to do it so the people in Europe, for example, kind of get cheaper energy, right? But they don't. As far as OPEC are concerned, they continue slowing down production because they know it gives them geopolitical power to screw over the global north. And quite frankly, the global north has done that to itself. Like, I'm sorry, you deliberately wanted to continue waging war with the global. The global north deserves it at this point because they've all of their time waging geopolitical economic war on the global south at the same time. So I mean, they quite frankly, I think that it's bad. I don't think OPEC should be slowing down production to screw over the global north because I think it's mean. But if you're gonna create an imperialist divide across the world as the global north, and then the people in the global south get together to screw you over by forming these cartels such as OPEC, then fuck it, you got what you wanted. Simple as that.
Let Nigel finish. John, let Nigel finish.
John, let Nigel finish. We'll come back to you. We will come.
Well, I mean, what we actually should do, Sky, is the Saudi Arabian and Qatari oil and gas extractors we have in the North Sea, we should just fucking nationalise them. We're out of the European Union now, so we can do it. We just fucking nationalise that shit. Something up to us now. Eminent domain. Fuck off. Fuck off back to Saudi Arabia. Don't clip that out of context, please.
Come back to you,
Well,
John.
be my guest, but unfortunately, you suffer from the disadvantage of being wrong.
We haven't rewarded Brexit voters and much of working class Britain with the genuine rewards that could have come. And I go back to that point.
Farage represents the interests of a sort of rentier class, not in a kind of classic bourgeoisie. Of course, this is the result of the whole neoliberal maelstrom of the shit from the last 40 years. Well, 100%, Edward. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Farage does indeed represent the rentier class, and that's why he is so fucking toxic, and why the fact that he is being treated as some kind of fucking populist kind of lightning rod for a bunch of people in this country is nonsensical. Him literally on TV right now talking about the benefits for the working class. I mean, there is no benefit of having people like you and the economy shaped for people like you, Nigel, when you're not productive and all you do is make rental income off of the actual hard work of the productive members of the working class in the society. OPEC trying to stick to the global north hurts the people least responsible for the global north's bullshit. I mean, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, I do believe you are correct, my rear end. But, the governments of the global north are the ones who are to blame, I guess. I mean, we could literally have oil, we have crude at that price if we just took the crude oil that we have in the ground in the North Sea and then the state extracted it and sold it at cost rather than having to buy it at global wholesale prices.
Just taking the 5% VAT off domestic fuel would have been a very clear Brexit win. But the big one, and this is what no one wants to talk about, and as I speak to you, I'm looking over the English Channel, all right? Now, there were no dinghies.
He's not even using headphones. He's not using we're getting fucking feedback from this end. Nigel, you're a multi-millionaire. Sort your fucking audio out.
Today, but on many days I can see them from this very room. We voted, millions of extra people turned out in that referendum who don't normally vote. And they did it to get back control of our borders and to reduce the numbers coming into Britain. That has been a catastrophe. And that has nothing to do with Brexit. It's actually to do with the Tory government and the fact we haven't completed Brexit by leaving
We're going to
ECH.
have to end it there because we're running out of time.
John,
Listen to that, and I understand your strength of feeling, and I don't dispute.
John, you can't just keep talking.
Let me put it to you like this.
I love saying, yeah, John, you can't keep talking when they kept interrupting John to shut him up and let Nigel talk for the entire time. I mean, obviously, I don't know why I would expect Esther McVeigh and Philip Davies to be good moderators and to be fair moderators in this discussion, but fucking hell.
Okay, well, if you just cut them both off, we've now got to go to the break.
John,
we should have a round two.
John, can I just ask? John,
£1 extra a week for the National Health Service.
Okay.
John, please.
Oh, John, please, can we cut John off now if he's not going to cut himself off?
I mean, it's.
Well, yeah, he's gonna have to say you never let him finish his points or even discuss it. Yeah, literally, we had an order moment there. We really did. Well, that was a fucking shit show. But turns out the leftists were right again, as we always are.